for the Agile community. www.Agile.FM.
Yeah, today I'm here with a very special person, a co-host of an Agile podcast, the Agile for Humans, Ryan Ripley, and we decided to co-deliver a podcast together today, and we wanted to talk a little bit about podcasts, but first of all, I want to get your voice in here early in the podcast. Ryan, welcome.
Hey, thank you, Joe. It's an honor to be on Agile.FM. It's one of the first podcasts I started listening to when I got interested, and just super excited to be able to first have met you. It was great meeting you in Boston earlier this year, and to now be doing a podcast with you, truly an honor.
Awesome, right? And the same here, Agile for Humans. I want to talk a little bit about this in a second with you, but why the title and so on, right? It's intriguing. We met, and it was a coincidence at a Scrum.org event, and there was a 3-day event, and I believe for the first day we didn't even know that we're both the podcasters.
Yeah, it was funny. We started talking, and then I heard your voice, and I was like, wait a minute, I know this voice. I have spent a lot of time with this voice. And then finally it hit me. It's like, oh no, this is Joe Krebs. This is Agile.FM. And started talking. But yeah, it was funny. I knew the voice well before I actually knew who you were.
Right.
So,
let me take a wild guess. The accent gave it away.
What accent, Joe? No, it was, I knew that voice from somewhere. And it was a crazy coincidence that we landed in a Train the Trainer event at Scrum.org. But yeah, that was a fun 3 days. It was good getting to know a lot of the people. And of course, it's great to meet a fellow podcaster. There's not too many of us who actually understand what goes into trying to make these shows. So it's nice to have another person to kind of talk to and just say, hey, this is what I've run into. What do you think? So
correct.
Yeah, it was really great.
Yeah, it's correct, right? So, and also maybe like the opportunities out there with podcasting and I want to hear what your motivations are, obviously. But first of all, Agile for Humans. What are you saying? My podcast is not for humans?
No, I think Agile.FM is very human-centric. But there's a lot of stuff out there in our community right now that's at that process and tool level, and that's where they stay. And it was actually an observation that Don Gray made. So initially, Agile for Humans didn't exist. It was just a Skype call that Don Gray, Esther Derby, Aaron Copel, some really high-level people, some really good friends of mine. We would just get on a call, and it was almost like coaches therapy. Mm-hmm. And so one day Don said, hey, let's record this. And so I was like, all right, let's record it. And then we had to name it, because if you record something, you got to name it before you post it.
Right.
And finally, I think Don threw out the name Agile for Humans. Hey, it's all about humans. Let's just call it Agile for Humans. And I was... All right, that was my horrible Don Gray impersonation, but yeah, the name stuck, and then people really liked it. They kind of had that same reaction you did of, well, what's behind that? What's that about? And then you say, well, it's for people. Agile is about the humans, the individuals, and interactions.
That's right.
And people are like, oh, that kind of makes some sense, and it stuck. And we put it out on the internet, and that first episode, and honestly, I have great friends. And they all tweeted it out, and I think they were like, hey, you really need to listen to this. They were really pushing it. We had a couple hundred listens that first week, and it just took off from there. I mean, it's really just one of those, it was really just a therapy session for coaches or just a place, we talk about cool ideas, and it was just a place to meet up and, hey, I've had this thought or this experiment, what do you think? And it's just turned into something so much different, as you well know from Agile.FM, just it just twists and turns.
Oh, absolutely. It's the whole inspect and adapt, and I can tell already that in terms of metrics and everything, you're far, far ahead of me in terms of listenerships, right? There are some metrics out there, but to be totally honest, I do this as long as I have one listener out there, right? And if I have non-listener, I would probably bury the idea, but there are hundreds, I don't know, maybe more listening to the episode. So that's really cool. So how this all started for you? I mean, for me, it was actually Agile.FM was called before Agile.FM. It was Agile New York City podcast. And
Yep.
and mine started a little bit different because mine started as a basically introducing speakers at local events. So I wanted to bring per podcast, basically, or it was a smaller listenership out there, bringing the speakers on the events or at a conference in New York City, which we organized here in New York, closer and said, like, hey, interesting person here, why don't you join the actual event in person? So the podcast was always ahead of the speaker coming to town. And then all of a sudden I got emails and interest from people. They said, oh, well, this is also interesting for us, and it doesn't have to be a user group event announcement, or it doesn't have to be a person that comes to a conference. It could be potentially anybody, and that's where the format changed to what's now Agile.FM.
You know, it's interesting you bring up New York. I had the opportunity to come out earlier this year for Big Apple Scrum Day and check out your community and check out, I had a great time playing chess in Washington Square Park, and being out in New York is just a lot of fun anyways, but getting to see some of the community stuff. Now, that wasn't the group you founded. You founded Agile NYC, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
And that's been that's like 10 years ago, I think that sprung up.
That's right.
What have you seen in the New York community, and what was it like really? I mean, for all intents and purposes, Joe, I mean, the Agile scene in New York, if it wasn't started by you, it certainly has been sustained and grown by you. What are you seeing these days out there?
What I see is that obviously we started very small. We started in a bar. It all started in an Irish bar in Manhattan, and it was a handful of people talking about Agile. So we basically had like these emails going out, who's interested in having a conversation, and user group and all these kind of things, which is totally out of the picture. I mean, we have to go back to 2000, what was that, maybe 6 or so. And a few people found each other, including myself, and I think it was 3 or 4 people at the beginning. And then in the bar, and the group grew to something, and then at one point we couldn't be in a bar anymore, and we had speakers come in. And lucky us, we had Pace University then join. So what happened, Pace University as a venue, as a host, and they really provided space to us, which was extremely important for us at that point, because we couldn't really move from one group to another or a company, and consistency. But what I see today is that the group has mushroomed into something bigger, right? So the topics are really about developers have created their own groups. You see topics such as very operational, like unit tests and topics like this. We stuck to the leadership, to the coaches, to the scrum masters, and so forth. We after 3 years or so, we started an Agile Day, an actual one-day conference, which we still do today. And so it's basically a mix of user group and conferences. And every time we did something, we learned something, right? We learned something we thought people come to the user group event, wanted to see something bigger and wanted to come to a conference. And as a matter of fact, this was totally 2 different audiences, which we didn't know at that time. Like, some people said, I can only come in the evenings. I can't really carve out an entire day for this, or, for whatever reason, I can't come to a conference day. And the other people who says, I can't spend my evenings in user group events, so they wanted to come to conferences. So it was a brand new audience. And so podcasting, the conference, the user group puts a good mix out there. So the event you attended is actually a spin-off of Agile NYC. So they branched off into something a little bit more scrummish, versus we have Kanban topics, lean topics, and so forth. And sometimes we have speakers that have nothing to do with Agile. They don't even know what Agile is. But we make the link as organizers of that topic is actually very relevant.
Yeah, I think it's interesting just how that environment's taken off and grown. I've been able to check out the Chicago environment a little bit, and what you find is it's a lot more fractured, in my view. There's a lot of great smaller meetup groups, but there's not like this central thread going through that community like there is in New York. There's not that that thing that you built that has that core group. But it's a great community out in Chicago as well. But it's just it feels different.
Yeah.
When you go to that New York event, it feels like you all know each other. You guys have been really building on this for a while. It's a mature group of people. In Chicago, it's very similar, except in that there are these kind of factions that it's kind of interesting to navigate. I don't know if you've been able to spend some time out here, but it's definitely a different feel.
Definitely different. It's the I would say the advantage here in New York is it's definitely the geographics, right? It's Manhattan. I
Right.
mean, it's people come in from all over the place to work in Manhattan, and then they stay for a user group event at night, for example, right? So there's definitely something about Manhattan and why it's such an island and hard, hard to do actually something outside in the burbs. It's the opposite what we're facing in New York and what you have in Chicago. So
It's funny you mentioned that because in Chicago, we have the exact. You're right. We have the opposite where a lot of events are happening in the burbs, but we're working in the city, and so it does make it. We kind of have the reverse thing, but each environment, each group, each community, distinct, interesting, different. But really enjoyed. I just wanted to tell you, I really enjoyed getting to come out to New York, and really enjoyed the things that you and many of the others have put together.
yeah, well, awesome. Thank you. And what I wanted to hear from you is actually because you work on a record pace on Agile for Humans for podcasts. I cannot keep up with your pace in putting episodes out, but how many episodes do you have out there so far?
I think last week number 79 went
Okay.
out.
Wow.
So we're getting closer to 100. We're working on it.
Yeah, so I think with Agile.FM, prior to that, I had many, many more, but it was somewhere in the 40, 45 or so range, I guess.
Yeah, it's for me, I don't. So I think these numbers are interesting, but what I like is that this community has a lot of different needs, right? So I want more podcasts out there, not less. And so I'm excited when someone like you says, "Hey, let's collaborate, let's do a co-show." I hope that the Agile for Human listeners go check out Agile.FM and realize all the good work you're doing. I hope it inspires 3 other people to spin up new podcasts, which I know, I'm sure you and I or anyone else in the community would be happy to help. Just the more content that gets out there, I think the better, and that it sends out these great messages. So, I'm excited that we're doing this, and I hope, you raise the tides and all ships go up, right? So for a rising tide raises all ships, and I love these opportunities, so really appreciate it.
Yeah, and I use this opportunity, right, because it's got to be somebody listening to Agile FM, let's say out of the New York City area, sitting, driving with a subway, listening to Agile FM, listening to this particular episode, and says, you know what, there's another Agile podcast out there. I'm going to tune into that as well and get more like the weekly rhythm from you,
Sure.
And get nice entertainment while going to work or while coming home from work or being in the car listening to this material. I think we have good speakers and guests in our podcast, and and people get inspired. Maybe so inspired that they want to become an agile leader at some point, and that's a topic we wanted to talk about, right?
Oh no, did you say the leader word? So, yeah, leadership's fun. It's one of those triggering kind of concepts for me where I hear agile leadership and I initially cringe, but then I'm open to listening. I know you definitely get it. I don't think many people realize that you and I have both held leadership positions prior to our deep dive into agile. I was a director at Lincoln Financial, which is a Fortune 200 financial firm. I know, looking at LinkedIn and talking to you, I know that you had a director stint at AOL a number of years ago. And so I think it gives us a different kind of perspective. My first move is not to bash management. I actually have a lot of empathy for management. I'd imagine you do too. But the leadership offerings, especially in the agile space, I don't know. What are your thoughts there? I've got mixed feelings.
Well, I agree with the management piece, right? I mean, you got to have empathy with management. There's definitely a hype on calling it leaders and versus managers, and I think the org charts are just filled with management titles. I think people like the title management. For me, it's not so much about the title. It's more about what people are doing in the day-to-day work. When leaders are out there, called leaders, and they're managing a silo in an organizational chart, exactly like a manager. I mean, what is it good for? It's really all right. I mean, it's really about, does a leader within an organization takes Agile seriously, right? For example, the transformation within an organization. Are they taking it serious, or are they just putting a stamp on it? Are they just gonna work within a project management practice and rolling out a iterative incremental process? I'm purposely not saying Agile, right? So it's just like, hey, let's chunk large projects up and get stuff done. And very often what you see, the environment is even more stressful than it was before, and people have less fun working in these environments because or after the transformation actually took place. And that's kind of sad. What do you think?
I've seen a lot of similar things. I do have this one story that I cling on to, and it was a situation where you brought up the silos, or a manager managing a silo that kind of jogged this loose. One of the best moments of Agile leadership that I ever saw. Right, so there were two teams servicing the same customer. They had their own silos within a customer, or basically the two silos had different roles, but they were working for the same customer within a company. And at one point, one of the managers of one of the groups said, "This does not make sense. We've siloed off two teams. We're constantly in conflict. We're trying to serve the same customer. The needs aren't getting met." And he put together this proposal that basically demoted himself to a technical lead, gave the management role to the manager of the other team, helped that team self-organize from a technical leadership role, even though he was no longer the manager, into one team, one cross-functional, self-organizing team, delighted their customer, results went through the roof. Just a really great story there, but far too often we hear kind of the reverse, where people are very worried about protecting silos, protecting roles, protecting prestige, and things, like you said, can get worse. But there is that one moment that I do remember where, and no, it wasn't me. The Agile for Humans listeners are waiting for that punchline where it was me doing something awesome. It was not me. Because I feel like some of the stories lately have gone in that direction. But no, this guy realized that they were not serving the needs of the customers. People themselves were not happy on the teams, and took an opportunity to be a true leader, even though that meant giving up authority. And I thought that was just such a fascinating move.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think what we often see is that managers turning into leaders are separately trained and coached from the development teams, right? When they are actually working on these things, so they are disconnected. And when you introduce the Agile concepts to the leadership part, possibly ahead of the development teams, and they're coming on as I learned about Agile, I'm excited, this all makes sense, and I want to do it, and they are enthusiastic about it, and they know exactly what they should be doing as leaders, and they're giving these responsibilities to the teams. The teams are often not ready for that, taking the responsibility, right? So there's this chaos basically between the leadership piece of an organization and the development teams. That all needs to be glued together, right? There has to be trust, has to be enabled. It's like, are they really talking the same lingo? Are we actually empowered to do certain things? Teams are confused very often, right? So there's so many things that go wrong in this leadership transformations. That's why I see this the biggest potential for us to work on in the upcoming years. I think that's not months, that's years.
Yeah, I think this is one of the new runways that are going to pop up, especially from a consulting perspective. It's if we can crack this nut, I think Agile has a very long and flourishing life ahead of it. If we don't get this leadership management debate settled and find effective ways to help companies move past some of these hangups, I think we're ripe to be disrupted with something else. And so maybe that's good. I mean, Agile in its back in the Snowbird days, it was disruptive to RUP and to Waterfall, and it needed it. But I think there will be some leadership or management transformation or revolution here that's going to cause some disruption. So I think you're right. I think this is the fertile ground right now. I think there's still value in let's get teams doing Scrum or Kanban or their preferred method, framework, methodology, whatever we're looking at. Let's get some proficiency there. Let's really learn what agility means. Let's work on the individuals and interactions and the communication and the collaboration. But it's going to be the leadership that ultimately will either crush these initiatives or help them flourish. So I think you're dead on with the idea that this is where the game's going to be for a while.
Yeah, I think also that in the beginning when we started doing Agile, there was a lot of grassroots movement. I mean, there were organizations that started all bottom up. I think that was the common theme in the early days of Agile. The teams heard about the manifesto, they found interest in it, they convinced people in-house to do something. But what we're seeing today is the opposite, right? We're seeing the top-down approach, at least in my world. It's pretty much, at this point, 99% is top-down, where people in the executive level actually make decisions to go Agile. Not even in IT organizations, business agility, right? Which is another reason why this is going to take off. It's like, it's not only the IT executive team, this is going to spread into other parts of organization, HR, finance, marketing. That's what we often see already at this point. We can only imagine how this is going to take off even further. So, yeah, it's always hard to give career advice, especially on a podcast, but yeah, I think there is a market.
Well, I think there's certainly a need that needs to be met. Your example of the HR person. What is HR going to do when we really get the self-organizing team concept correct? But they're showing up looking for individual performance reviews, individual merit and bonus rewards, and they just don't. Those things don't make sense anymore, especially on an Agile team. And so, I mean, they're going to get disrupted. There's going to be implications to legal, to finance. An annual budget will not make sense when teams reach that hyper-velocity state that Jeff Sutherland talks about, or a high-performing team. When they're truly hitting that stride, an annual budget won't cut it. I mean, we're going to need to be able to inspect and adapt finances and available funding and those things so much faster than what we do today. So, yeah, I think we've spent a lot of time on teams, and we've spent a lot of time on processes and frameworks and tools and those things. This is going to shift, and I think if you're in HR, you're in finance, you're in legal, learning about Agile now, I think there's some definite opportunities to get ahead of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think marketing might be a little bit an exception to this, right? But
sure,
HR definitely is in various positions. Often they bring in Agile into an HR organization to do Agile within the HR department, right? So they say, how can I use, let's say, Scrum to run an HR event, right? Or a comp or bonus rounds or something like that using Scrum. But I think this is the smaller piece of all that. I think the bigger piece is really of what's the impact of my culture. So the more teams are working in Scrum and using the Agile to its fullest extent, the culture is going to change. And
well, I think it's gonna spread outside of IT as well.
Yes.
My twin brother is a lawyer in Indiana, and he's brought Scrum into his law practice, and so he's trying to find ways to leverage empiricism, to act transparently as a lawyer, to inspect and adapt practices. I mean, he's taken that fully to heart, and he's looking for ways to make that a competitive advantage as a lawyer. And he's actually found some compelling ways where he's able to do, it's not better, faster, cheaper, but it's more meaningful work sooner for his clients at a different rate because his costs are different when he embraces this mindset. I think it's going to turn into a competitive advantage for him.
Oh yeah,
so I think any profession, most professions, I think could benefit just from that empirical mindset. But when you look at not only IT, legal, there's the Agile Marketing Institute that's popped up recently. I really think that although it's 20 years old, I think we're just seeing it's now. Finally, I think the joke was Scrum just turned 21, which means it's allowed to go into casinos and drink now, which means it's just maturing. I mean, it's just in its 20s. We haven't even we're not out of the awkward 20s yet, Joe. We got to get to the 30s and 40s, right?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's a good point you bring up, right? I mean, unless there is another disruptor, let's say, in the industry, I think this is gonna take off. I think people are seeing the advantages. I mean, I had I worked with a client on business development in Asia using Scrum. So it was really about how do I expand my business into that region. I had nothing to do with IT whatsoever. It was super interesting to work on something like this for me because my background is IT. So I'm so out of my comfort zone, just advising on the process rather than the content. Purely superb. I know that the Boy Scouts in Boston are using principles of Agile to organize themselves. So it just doesn't stop, right? And I had a podcast one time with with somebody who did, I forgot her name. She did Scrum at home with her family. It's just purely awesome.
Is that Stacy Ackerman?
Yes, thank you for that. I want to make sure that we're getting her name out for this, right? And simply awesome. And so there's so many things. The principle of thinking could apply, right? And when you're writing a book, I mean, who would use a waterfall process for that, right? So it's just the thinking and how you approach it. And I'm just I can't wait to see that expand. But it does require those leaders to make it happen. Leaders to understand what this all means and make it super successful.
Yeah, it's the short feedback loops that I think power a lot of the things you're saying. And for a leader to put their work out a little early before it's perfect is scary, right? And risky. And if you're in a highly politically charged environment, it creates opportunity for someone else to come after you.
Right.
And it's one of those things where that's why I think leadership at the highest levels, I think that's why they're so crucial, because they can end that nonsense quickly, right? They can really empower people to embrace transparency, to inspect work, to do adaptations without punishment, right? Instead of being wrong, we just learned something, and now we're going to try something a little different, and we're going to inspect that again. And guess what? Guy down the hall who's taking cheap shots at everybody who might be not doing so well, we're checking out your work next. So let's all just work together and be a team instead of trying to maneuver and posture and position. And I think when those barriers come down, I think that's where the agility really starts. And so it does start with the leadership, and it starts with people, those initial coaching conversations. And if we get those right, I think you've hit it on the head. That's really where the game's going to be at.
But Ryan, now I have to update my PowerPoint deck again. Even we're constantly inspecting and adapting. I was like, it's like everybody wants a PowerPoint deck. Now I have to change it again. Painful.
You know what? I'm going slideless. I just draw on whiteboards now. So it drives all the conference organizers nuts. They want the slide deck ahead of time, but I just draw. I'm trying to steal Jeff Payne's. I'm trying to figure out what camera he uses where he just does the drawings for his talks. And
yes, it's
I think I'm just going to use that for meetings now too.
Yeah.
All you're going to get out of me in the future are just pretty pictures. That's it.
Yeah. Well, I can do stick figures. That's all I can do. But
that's enough.
That's enough, right? But no, I was kidding, because on the leadership side, right, we see at executive levels, we see PowerPoint still today, like a ton of that. And every time I see that, I think about all those thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars wasted on maintaining and keeping those and updating and reviewing. And I mean, it's painful, isn't it, to watch all this happening? And what could we build in the meantime? It's one
of those mechanisms where I think we look busy, right? I mean, look at these 100 slides I put together. It shows I really know what I'm talking about. And I think that's one of those mental models that we're going to have to find a way to get around or to change, and just realize that, as a leader, if we can set a vision, if we can express clearly a desired outcome, and then trust people to go after that, but then also be there to support them as they do it, that's really the game now. It's not trying to figure everything out in 100 slides and to give detailed marching orders. I mean, the military doesn't even work like that. If you read Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink, he talks about combat situations where they were given an objective, and they were given the tools necessary and a cross-functional team, and they were told to execute. And that was it. So they had an objective, the tools, and the people, and they went out and they're making combat situational decisions constant.
Right.
And I now, while hopefully for software, you're not risking your life as you're writing it, But you are on a cross-functional team. You hopefully have the tools you need, your IDE, the APIs that you use, whatever that you need to get the job done. And as a team, you're asked to execute.
Right.
And then you're making tactical decisions and strategic decisions at some points.
Right.
And hopefully your leadership is empowering you and providing you the ability to make progress and to do that. And I think that's the distinction. And as we're all going to get it wrong. I had moments as a leader where I just totally screwed up situation. I got very problem solving. I was really prescriptive. And later on, I had to go back and kind of pull some of that back. And I think we're always going to have those moments. But
always,
if we can set vision and just help people execute, and by help, I mean give them the tools, give them the support they need, give them the shelter that they need, give them the information they need, and then just watch that execution. And as long as the feedback loops are short enough, what are you really risking?
Right. That's
I don't think it's much.
Yeah, but it's very interesting when you just were talking about the combat situation. There was this one thing I was listening to last week, and it just became apparent in the very same way, just to support your story, which is absolutely correct. The freeing of there was a hostage taking in Mogadishu, like a German airplane, 40 years ago. It was just anniversary day for this one, and they actually approached this plane and they had to go in and they were like reliving this entire storming, let's say, of the airplane. And they just had like this amazing group of people that were going into this plane. But they said, we didn't even know if the door would open of the plane. They had we had to take an approach one step after another, right? So they had a plan A, a plan B. They said like, that's the vision. The vision was very big, freeing those people, right? And capturing the hostage takers. But they didn't even know if the door would open up. They didn't even know where everybody was in the plane, and they had to take a totally situational approach. And it actually worked the best way. That they would just let the people do their job, and just like you know what the mission is, and go after it. And they did it. It's an amazing story.
Yeah, and there's also what's interesting about these kind of stories is there's also an incredible amount of planning involved. As Agilists, we get this bad rap of, you don't want to plan, you don't want to commit, you don't want to estimate.
Yeah.
And that couldn't be furthest from the truth. You think about the squad that rescued the hostage, they're committed to one another to keep each other alive.
Exactly.
Massive commitment, right?
Yes.
They have plan A, plan B, plan C, and then they can improvise. And so they have the talent to, first of all, plans for some scenarios, but they also know, hey, these plans are dead. We need to switch it up. There's all these great things in these analogies that come right back to software, and it's the same. Again, it's not the life or death situation, but when we start, let's say we're building a product, we don't know if our AWS cluster is going to be in the right zone and if we're going to have the right latency or throughput, or there's all these things that happen on a DevOps side. There's all these things that happen on an integration side. There's all these things that happen during testing, and we can plan for a lot of it. We know the lead time of spinning up a cluster in the cloud. But we also know that Amazon is capable of going out when they had a blackout day, I think it was right around a year ago.
Yeah.
And then what do you do? What's your backup? And then suddenly every IT department and every big product company was firing up Azure as well for some backup plan, and now they know better for next time. And so the world is complex.
Yes.
Right? If it were only complicated or difficult, you wouldn't need Agile. Right. But we live in a complex, fluid world. We inspect, we adapt, we embrace continuous improvement, and it's a beautiful thing when you let it happen and when you get out of the way of it. And I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Well, Ryan, we have been talking for a while.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Have we? Oh wow, we're probably towards our time box, aren't we?
Yeah, we're time boxing. Yeah, but wanted to ask you is how can we do shout outs to Chicago? How do we create?
How do we do shout outs? Yeah. Well, I'm happy to continue the conversation. I can't speak for Chicago, and actually, we're still struggling. The Cubs lost, and so Chicago's a little down right now. I did take my wife to the Bears game this past Sunday, though, and we did beat Carolina. So go Chicago.
Okay.
But if you want to keep the conversation going, the website's ryanripley.com. I'm on Twitter at Ryan Ripley. I can clearly, as your audience has heard me ramble through some of these topics, I can go on and on about this stuff forever. So if people really want to dig into one of these topics, I would love for them to reach out. Joe, how can the Agile for Humans listeners, first of all, listen to Agile.FM.
Agile.FM, that's right.
Let's check that out on iTunes. I'm sure it's out there.
Yeah.
But if they want to reach out and hang out with you online, where can they find you?
Well, they can find me, actually, the easiest would be Agile.FM. They can just send me an email, would be probably the easiest, or my Twitter handle is JOCHENKREBS, Jochen Krebs. That would be
awesome.
That would be the easiest way for getting in touch, and then we'll have conversations. And why this is so important for me is that people listening in all these places that they know now there is something going on in Chicago. They might be on a business trip. They might not know what to do on a business trip in Chicago. Hey, there is an Agile event. I'll go there, even if it's only for one time. And you never know what that does. I know that our conference, the Agile Day, the one-day conference, had a spin-off with David Hussman in the Twin Cities, right? So. Yep. I know when people meet, most likely actually in person, right, in conferences or any kind of these events, all of a sudden something happens and comes out of it, and that's the power of all that.
Or even when two podcasters meet in Boston, right?
That's right.
That's a good example. So I actually have a link to a Chicago Tech calendar that has a lot of the local Agile and developer events on it. So I will put a link to that in the show notes, and I'll get that over to you, Joe, so that
awesome.
Your listeners can see what's going on our side of the country. Mm-hmm. And I think next year, like I said, I did Big Apple Scrum Day last year. I might try to get out to your
to the
Agile NYC, your Agile Day,
awesome.
And see if I can make another trip out to New York. Last time it went it was actually a great trip. Mm-hmm. So definitely looking forward to some speaking opportunities out your way again. So awesome. We'll see if we can make that happen.
For sure. Awesome. Looking forward to that. And
so, Joe, I just want to thank you.
Thank you.
As we wrap this up, like I said, Agile.FM was one of the first podcasts that I was listening to. It was one of the first ones that I really focused on as I was trying to figure out the kind of show that I wanted to put together. So it's a huge honor to get to do this show with you, and I just can't thank you enough for the opportunity.
Well, same here. And Ryan, I know yours is going to take off like crazy. You have a great way of doing this, and it's great. The more podcasting, the better. The more options, the better. I just want to say thank you to everyone.
All right. Thank you, and to the Agile.FM audience, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this show. Keep supporting Joe. And to my Agile for Humans listeners, hey, check out Joe. It's great stuff.
Thank you for listening to Agile.FM, the radio for the Agile community. I'm your host, Joe Krebs. If you're interested in more programming and additional podcasts, please go to www.agile.fm. Talk to you soon.